Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. So welcome to everyone viewing on YouTube. Elected members of the committee unable to join the meeting in person are able to join remotely. However, they will not form part of the forum, will not be able to vote, and their attendance will not be officially recorded, although their virtual attendance will be noted in the minutes. Independent members, in fact, we have one independent member here. Independent members unable to join us are also able to join us remotely. They retain speaking rights. Anyone attending remotely must turn on their camera when addressing the committee. With regards to meeting etiquette, please may I ask that you indicate you wish to speak by raising your physical hand if you're present or your virtual hand if you are online. Please note that the chat function in Zoom will not be used in this meeting, and questions and comments on the agenda pack should be raised via the chair. We have a busy agenda, and I would ask members to be mindful of time and mindful of the chair's direction. Welcome to you all. I am Tony McCormick, the chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And for the viewing public, I ask Councillor Masters to introduce herself, and then we go in that order.
I'm Councillor Susan Masters. I'm a councillor in East Ham South and also chair of Health and Adult Social Care, Equalities and Air Quality Commission.
Liz Booker, member for Little Ilford.
Yes. Yes, Ellen.
I'm Ellen Kemp. I'm a co-option member representing the Church of England. Councillor Richard Cantano.
Councillor Terry Paul, Stratford Ward.
Belma O'Doyle, Custom House.
Okay, and any member online? Okay. Welcome to you all. We have a full house in terms of chamber in terms of witnesses. I won't go through to ask each and every one of you to introduce yourself now, but can I ask, when you're speaking for the first time, you do introduce yourself. Having said that, I do recognize the mayor, I recognize the chief exec, and the Section 151 officer, Conrad Hall. And forgive me for not naming the others, but you will name yourself when you speak for the first time. To members of the commission, may I ask that you agree a reordering of the agenda? My suggestion is that item 9 now becomes item 5, item 7 now becomes item 6, item 6 become item 7, item 8 remain item 8, and item 5 becomes item 9. Is that agreed? Yeah. Thank you all. Apologies for absence. Yes.
Chair, sorry, would you kindly just recap on the reordering of the agenda so that we're clear?
Okay, all right. So item 1 to 4 remain as is. Item 9 is now item 5. Item 7 is now item 6. Item 6 is now item 7. Item 8 remain as is. And item 5 is now item 9. Item 10 and the other items remain as is.
Sorry, Chair. I had made family arrangements based on the agenda item being number 5 that I'm here for.
Yes.
Is it at all possible not to do that change?
Right. We have.
Chair, can I make a suggestion that
Yes.
we take item 5?
Pardon?
That we take item 5.
Okay. Okay. Members are mindful. Thank you. Okay. Yes, apologies for absence.
Oh, apologies from councillor Sharp.
That noted? Okay. Declaration of interest. Are there any members wishing to declare any interest? No, the clerk would note no members wish to declare any interest. Minutes of our last meeting held on the 15th of February, pages 7 to 14.
Yes. I have a couple of typos that, if you allow me, I'll send to the clerks separately after the meeting. But the one I will draw your attention to is on page 4, item 9. The scrutiny work programme should be referring to freedom passes and not disabled badge.
Yeah. That noted? Any other contribution to the minutes? Okay. I therefore move that this is an accurate recordings of the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of February, 2024. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Booker seconding that item. Now I would move on to item Chair's report. Colleagues, since our last meeting, yes, chairs, especially myself, I've had a number of meetings. I have had the usual meeting with the mayor, and at that meeting, we had a number of discussions. Mostly these discussions are for information purposes, sharing of information, advice, etc. And they're about ensuring that scrutiny function run as smoothly as possible. So it's a collaborative meeting. Some of the items discussed at that meeting is upcoming items for our agenda, and that is just to give the mayor an insight of what is coming up. And can I say at the earliest insight, the mayor does not direct what our agenda item is, and she does not direct what we do in scrutiny. I always like to see it as the Prime Minister visiting the monarch, and you have that kind of conversation. And that is how I normally find it, because scrutiny is an independent function of council, and scrutiny reports to scrutiny. Okay, so I have meetings scheduled with the chief exec. We haven't had one in weeks, but I know there's one in the diary. I cannot remember. Michael, I did ask, do you know what time that meeting is scheduled for?
Chair, I don't have that to hand.
I know it's around the corner. Abby, can you
No.
Yeah.
And we had some of the other scrutiny chairs present.
That's right. You know, and you're right. But because I'm accustomed you and I meeting as on a one-to-one, you're right. We had a meeting about 3 weeks ago. Okay.
One juicy.
Yes, and there's one that is due. We as chairs also have meetings every 2 weeks. We had one on the Friday gone, and that is to manage the business of scrutiny. And I do also have a meeting fortnightly with officers, again, to aid the running of scrutiny. Is there any particular question that we may want to know? Yeah. No? In the interest of time, I would now move on to the substantive item. Item 5. And this is the right. The cost of living, this is the cost of living item. And Councillor Wilson, between yourself and Jason, you have 2 minutes in terms of any introduction before I go into members' question.
Thank you very much, Chair. So Councillor Neil Wilson, Cabinet Lead for Health and Adult Social Care, and here to just briefly introduce this, which is the second part of your deliberation around how we're responding to the cost of living crisis. Basically, the paper outlines the more partnership work, whereas last time I understand your deliberations are around internal structures regarding the new money and other financial incentives we're putting in place in order to help our hard pressed residents. Clearly, the cost of living is no longer being called a crisis in which we expect people are, actually accepting that there's high inflation going down, but people with real disposable income, particularly in the London area, with housing costs are forever increasing, with a lot of our residents in private rented sector, some of which in itself gives rise to all sorts of other issues around the quality of their housing stock. But this is how we, apart from a health point of view, is that there are several, and Councillor Masters and I discussed it at length in our portfolio, how the wider determinants of health, not least reflected on the recently adopted health and wellbeing strategies, which you said, but this is more in terms of how we're actually doing some real partnership work with our voluntary sector. Council cannot do everything. We learned from COVID-19 that we really need to invest in terms of people, not just a volunteering, but how they can actually access real food quality. So there's references here about food and nutrition, and you've asked some peanuts for inquiry, and officers are here to answer about the food provision, but also how that partnership works in place in terms of, for instance, the development of the wall havens. I think you may have seen Jason and I have some appearance on a BBC programme recently. I can't mention that, and I think I'll leave it there, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you, Humbert. Right, I've seen them in the order. Councillor Paul, Charter, Masters. Tell me.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. There's lots of good work here. I'll just try and
Sorry.
Stop.
Sorry, Councillor Paul.
Okay. There's lots of good. Thank you for the report. There's lots of good work here, and I'm just trying to get a feel for what is our definition of a cost of living crisis. And the reason why I ask that: when do we stop doing this? There's £18.6 million grants ending in. I know the grants are left. I just want to get a feel for the added value of all our work, and when do we scale it down? What is our organisational definition of a cost of living crisis? In Councillor Wilson's introduction, he mentioned impact on disposable incomes and the housing crisis. But what definitions are we using as an organisation to define what is a cost of living crisis?
I think one of the things, Jason Strellick's Corporate Director for Adults, Health and Communities. I think one of the things that Councillor Wilson mentioned is that, in a sense, we're not really in a crisis anymore. That we had a crisis driven by a peak of a crisis driven by inflation that had a deep impact, but that's come on a long history of chronic issues of poverty and inequality that are faced by communities in our borough. So I think, with that in mind, we really turn to two ways. So one is there's the long-term strategy around developing an inclusive economy that the Mayor but there's also trying to meet people's acute needs in that context of chronic inequality. I think our strategy, our strategy is to move to, as much as we can, a sustainable approach of doing that, which is rooted in that partnership working. So scaling down, from where we spent, for example, a lot more on the New Food Alliance to a much leaner kind of approach, which Andy can speak to in detail. But it's about continuing to work with our voluntary community organisations to meet acute need, but in a sustainable way.
Yeah, just a quick. Yeah. We're not in a crisis, so I assume therefore this is about business as usual. But then you said we're meeting acute needs. I would just say it will be helpful if, as an organisation, we define what we meant by cost of living crisis. If we're not careful, we could be perpetuating this work, and it might not be targeted. So just an observation, really good work here. But so when you talk about disposable income, There are metrics you could use to define your value. You mentioned the housing crisis. There's very limited we can do as local authority. And really my comment has been lots of good work, lots of stuff being done, but my challenge, I'll leave it at this, it's about the added value going forward and maintaining that value going forward. And that's the context of my question.
Mayor.
I just wanted to pick up on the point around definition of cost of living crisis and what constitutes business as usual. And I think it's important to inject into the conversation and the debate from the outset in terms of the administration's posture. It's been a decidedly anti-poverty approach in the context of what we know as being the regular normatised features of the condition of living in a borough such as Newham that predates COVID-19 and predates the cost of living crisis. So our business as usual is a borough of profound acute need as a consequence of entrenched inequality. And there's an evidence base that has both informed our COVID-19 response, but also post-COVID-19, our cost of living crisis response. And that evidence base was developed through our commissioned work with PDR, economic consultants. So we can provide that information as well as part of response. But thank you very much for the question.
Okay. Councillor Chorda, Rita.
Chair, I have 6 questions, but in the interest, I'll ask 3, if that's all right. They're very quick.
2 for now. I can come back to you. The 2 best ones.
They're all good. Page 2. On page 2, you talk about co-design and co-own. Very familiar with co-design. How do we in the cost of living define co-own? Second question is, page 7 refers to Social Welfare Alliance, improving how are you going to improve confidence in the training? Because the figures are exactly fantastic. The training that's being provided, people don't seem to be having enough confidence from that. Are there any opportunities to improve that? I'll leave it there, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
You want to talk about co-owned in the new food rights?
Yeah, absolutely. And page shows that 11.5 that you're.
Sorry, I haven't got it right in front of me, but yeah.
So in terms of co-ownership, so when we set out on this in the spring of 2020, obviously the first motivation in COVID, we came together with a group of partners, with the council as a partner, and a recognition that we were both going to get stuck with this situation, whether we did something, whether we didn't.
Sorry, I just think.
Head of food strategy. No, we don't take like food alliances.
So is New Food Alliance a separate entity because you're talking about it? So if it is.
The best way to describe the New Food Alliance is a way of working as partners in Europe. So we have a set of agreed values, principles, ways of working. Every partner meets a certain set of agreed standards. And then effectively the council works as a partner, and one of the things that we provide in conjunction with 39 community organisations is we provide effectively the hosting. So we co-produce with a group of partners those standards, that way of working, and then we continue to co-own it and make sure that everyone within that partnership is back to those standards. Does that make sense?
It does. But Chair, just because this has happened at another committee recently, can I just ask, are you a council employee?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So, okay, on that basis, it's not really co-owned, is it? Because you could take away the resources at any point. And the voluntary sector wouldn't have a say, would it?
But they could take away there as well. So the point about this way of working, so we've often in another forum, some of you would have seen, I know Councillor Martin, we called it when we got going the mighty sandwich way of working. So it wasn't me that came up with this, but the idea that the council provides the bread and the community organisations in the middle provide the filling in that sandwich. And the reality is if they took away their resources, we would, as a council and a borough, be worse off. And obviously, if we stop investing in our community partners, we as a council will be guaranteed to be worse off. So in effect, there's tremendous codependency and there's a recognition that this way of working is a win-win for everybody in a very, very difficult situation. I think Councillor Paul's point, we're in a cost of living reality, aren't we now? That's what our community partners tell us. We've gone from a crisis to this being just the normalisation of how organisations are functioning, how we are having to function and how our residents are having to live. Does that make sense? So I would say it really feels co-op. It all stands to benefit if we work this way.
On the training outcomes, I mean, I think they're not too bad. This is hard stuff to give people more confidence, and most people are saying they feel more confident in the result. I'll take that away and speak to the team who are doing the training and find out a bit more about that.
No, I'm really with work. So again, speaking relatively to the way others operate, social welfare alliance is as old as New Food Line. And that idea that when we do direct food support, it should never be instead of, but as a way of directing people towards statutory entitlements. We do as big a training program as I'm aware of anywhere. And if you look at that list of, you know, confident to extremely confident, it's about organisations moving forwards and feeling more, you know, in all cases, more confident. That makes sense. And that's a big thing in a piece of work when compared to sort of other ways of working.
I understand the ambition. I just don't think the data matches the ambition.
Okay, I'm Councillor Masters.
Firstly, I'd just like to start by saying I was there at the very beginning of the Social Welfare Alliance as somebody who was managing a food bank with a local charity and then transitioned it into a food club. So I'm very aware of the great work that the Social Welfare Alliance has done. However, I have two really, really big questions. One kind of builds on what Terry was saying. I'm a bit worried that once again, with a public health project, we're getting numbers without any context. If you go to page 17, there's this incredible quote, "No baseline measure for need and demand." And my question to you is, why not? Because without that, we're not really understanding where this demand lies, in which communities, what's driving it. And then my second question is very, very different. And it's about the role, the important role that I would expect to be played in terms of the regulation of food banks and food clubs, and making sure that the proper safeguarding is in place, given that a lot of them are dealing with people who are very vulnerable, but also that each food bank is actually moving people on and understands where to sort of send them. Because what we don't want is a model that is just self-perpetuating, as Councillor Paul was referencing. A lot of the people who've got issues could benefit from receiving advice or into employment, into understanding, you know, what benefits they might have available to them into different networks, which is kind of where we get into the Social Welfare Alliance. But just how do we ensure that is happening across the board, and that we haven't got organisations that are exploiting a situation to exploit vulnerable people for their own ends?
Yeah, so that's essentially always the challenge and the argument for having a tent in which you have good organisations inside. So anyone that operates inside the New Food Alliance has met those thresholds. And that's important, and that somebody exists to keep checking and pushing on those. Now, when you get beyond that, for example, maybe other triggers and way of scrutinising within the process, if there are any grants, start from a baseline and then are able to raise your ask. If there are additional sources of food beyond, obviously, everyone in the room, we run our network based on large amounts of surplus food from the Feeds project, and then other food on top. Now, organisations could go and get that food anyway, but by us being involved, we get that initial agreement that everyone who's a New Food Alliance partner meets those standards. Now, whenever we have anything on top of that, we are able to increase our ask and obviously scrutinise, work with partners, visit, and try wherever possible to put that work in the frame of.
If I can interrupt as a supplementary, what about the ones who aren't doing that we might come across or get wind of? What are we doing about those if they refuse to sort of amend their standards to?
So any organisation that fell outside the partner standards and was to do so, and that's obviously sometimes a different thing than what is whispered, what is seen, what is inspected, what is checked, what is there in the paperwork, would obviously not be welcome inside the New Food Line. That's really important.
What do we do about them? Do we allow them to continue sort of offering food to people and
if they fell outside of our framework, and that governance is applied to everyone across the board, whoever they are, with no fear or favour, if they fell outside of those governance standards, they would simply not be welcomed by the New Food Line and would receive no benefit.
But really, are you telling me that we couldn't do anything about people who are exploiting people's vulnerability?
Without,
Is it? They don't come in.
they would leave any connection with us. And whether we'd be in a position, again, you'd be talking about something then that would move from within our framework, within our governance, within our partnership. We've obviously always got our statutory powers, which are already applied.
So we would apply adult safeguarding.
But that already applies anyway, doesn't it, to any organisation operating in any way? And it's, in a sense,
So yes is the answer.
yes, we're
Okay,
looking
fine.
to go much further than this, aren't we? And have organisations operating at a best practice level rather than just scraping by statutory inspections that are there already. That we would, does that make sense? It's about moving forward.
It does, that's fine. And then in terms of my second question,
So can I, we did say we're not going to be button passing. Is it, very important that you answer that bit now?
I can give a written response.
Yes, because, we have a very packed agenda. Okay, so if I have time, I'll bring you back in, depends.
the second question was asked. I'm waiting for an answer to it.
Okay, can we, make it as quickly as
So I
possible?
think there are many things we do have baselines for. We've got baselines from the kind of research that the Mayor mentioned around levels of poverty, around benefit take up, but it's very hard to have a baseline for the kind of need that presents itself. That is that's much more.
But we actually sort of provided software, didn't we, to charities? Didn't we provide Upshot so that people could actually sort of register quite a few characteristics?
It was discussed, but then we moved obviously to the New Food Lights front door model, which was more effective and actually resourced to manage that and work with organisations. In the end, software worked with organisations, so they discussed.
But also those needs change as context changes. So, for example, the huge change in our refugee and asylum population or in international students, those change the presenting needs that exist in the borough.
But I'd still expect us to be capturing that, and I find it really worrying that we don't seem to have that baseline, even if that baseline is shifting.
Yeah, we capture data. We could tell you, for example, so it's always the first place where you can spot a change in the weather. So, for example, with international students, the first place we picked it up was with New Food Light front door through the New Food Light meetings. So, yeah, unless I misread that, obviously, the bullet number.
10-1.
10-1. Yeah, so we're always picking it up. I would say it's the first place you get the weather.
Okay, so 10.1 might want to be rewritten.
It's the first place you know.
Okay, we do need to move on. I've seen you, Liz, so tell them again, Liz.
I wanted to ask about the Newham hubs on. So there's a table that shows all the different organisations and a number of referrals, signposts change. And for some of these, like the numbers are really small, like 0. And for example, housing support, we all know that the housing crisis is a massive issue for us in Newham. And this report talks about accommodation pressures. So the numbers seem so small. I'm just wondering that are these organisations being as efficient as possible? And show some categories are financial support, housing support, employment. Yes, we are supporting these residents, but do we know how satisfied they are after they receive them?
Thanks, good question. So, I mean, the first thing to say is the reason some of the numbers are very small is because the Newham hubs is a relatively new initiative and it is peripatetic. It's moving around these different venues. It may have only been based in these places a very, very limited number of times. So that would be the reason why the numbers are small.
But for example, like I know that the Canning Town one is quite new, so I remember it being launched, but that has some of the highest numbers. So I'm just wondering, like with the other ones, why is it so small?
Okay, I haven't got all of the. I can dig into that a bit more. The other thing is we are getting. So we now have the Joy system, which is our social prescribing referral system, and we are starting to get some really rich outcomes data from that, which I can share some of that as well. Around the impact for residents. Yeah.
And the figures on that, if I'm not mistaken, are about 1,000.
Yeah, it's immense.
But that's from a much broader referral route, yeah.
But sorry, just not to prolong it too much, yeah. But I mean, you know, for instance, in my local library, Newham are there sort of once a week, but we're trying to actually try to maximise the geographical spread of where the Newham hubs are operating. But Jason is absolutely right that these relatively small teams, but trying to actually, in a short period, capture as much of the data that you're on.
Thank you, and Liz.
Actually, I think probably I don't need to ask my questions, because I just went through trying to think how many things I had to declare before I did it. And I got up to 5 and thought I might not ask any questions.
Okay, so therefore, I would come back to Rita, and that would be the last speaker or questioner on this.
I just want to follow on from what Councillor Master said about safeguarding. We know from other jurisdictions that actually the far right and some extremist groups use food banks as a way to galvanise interest. So, it would be really reassuring to know what vigilance mechanisms do we have to make sure that those types of organisations, and I would also say even the national accredited networks like Trussell Trust have also had accusations made against them as well. Whether they're right or wrong is a different issue, but I think we do have to be vigilant on that. And that also then leads me to the other question that I wanted to ask, which is, it says on 13.2 that this is not a specific service, so no equality impact assessment is required. Now, while technically, I would question whether that is really the case, but isn't it in your interest to have an equality impact assessment on this? Because otherwise, how do you know if there's any success? How do you know if you're resourcing in the right way?
I think it's a good point. I mean, I think doing an equalities assessment of this work is really important. So yeah, it's not a specific service, it's an approach. It's quite a complicated approach. It's got multi-layers, but I think it's a good point.
So perhaps we could, in your own good time, ask for that to come back to this committee.
Yeah.
And with that, allied safeguarding around extremists, and making sure extremists don't take hold of food banks.
Yeah, I think what I would say on that is, we have the work that Andy does to support and build new food lines. As with everything, we rely on the collective intelligence of the community and yourselves. For example, councillors have a lot of intelligence about organisations working in your ward. So safeguarding is everyone's business, right? And so actually we've got mechanisms within the team to work with that network, but we collectively also rely on everyone to raise issues and concern when if people have concerns about particular organisations to be raising that.
Chief Executive Kabi.
Sorry, just in response to Councillor Chudder's last part, the response can't be made in full here, but I will pick up with Alid to respond with a programme of work around extreme food behaviour. Okay. That to come as a follow-up answer. Sorry, I'm very loud. Did you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can take that back on behalf of.
Thank you.
Just a small quick one, Chair.
And is that a follow-up to
just back in Councillor Chadwick's question about the lack of EQIA. Going back to my earlier question, but the lack of definition about what you're doing with this. It's very output-based, not outcome-based. Would it be helpful, perhaps, if you went away and reflect and came back with some metrics about this scheme? We're not, for me, speak for myself, there's some really good work here. Are we giving money to the right people, and are we putting added value in the right place? Based on this report, I can't define that, right? Even though I know some good work being done. And it might be beneficial for us to do that as an organisation. Obviously, Council had made an effort to prevent various other things like that, and that's what implies what I've got. We're not proactive in seeking information when prevent asks you to be proactive to seeking. And I just perhaps put a little framework around it. And I think it's some good work. Prevent outcome measures. Just a really long way of making up.
So I guess just 2 things, and then Abby wants to come in as well. So I would challenge the idea that it's not outcome focused. We're trying to stop our community from being hungry. That's the outcome of the new food lines work.
But you haven't told me who and how.
Sorry?
You haven't told me who and how.
I have. There's a lot of details in there around.
and this is dragging on longer than I intend, so we have to be
And we haven't had any.
Very quick.
To my knowledge, we haven't had prevents come to us with any issues around any of the.
No, and when we discuss it in a national context, that thing that we do trying to stay close to our they together, they're trying to stay in an active and open dialogue constantly is seen as best practice.
Yeah.
But again, you know, the challenge of where this is doing more than things that we do already, that becomes a complication. Does that make sense? Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Thank you. Councillor Trotter, can you submit the remaining question in writing so that you can get the written response? And that goes to other members. Abby.
Sorry, Chair, I'm going to be really, really brief, but I'm just mindful. I'd be very careful for us to say that we are not being proactive in the prevent space.
Okay,
We are
yeah,
significantly, and I think it's just to kind of close down that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's proactive, it's needed. It is proactive and it is working very well.
Good chat.
Thank you. I ask members to note the work being undertaken by the council in tackling the housing, the cost of living crisis in the borough. Is that noted?
Noted. Thank you very much.
We now moved into the next item, which be item 7. It is now item 7, which now become our item 6. We have several participants for this item, namely Councillor Ali, Conrad Orr, Andrew Ward, Councillor Mohammed, and Baron Levy. The purpose of this item is to consider the council's budget performance and overall financial position. The committee will particularly focus on the temporary accommodation situation. So, thank you all for coming, and can I remind you all to, if you're speaking for the first time, please do introduce yourself for the viewing public. I have looked at this financial report, perused it that is being provided, and for me, the figures are alarming. And one of the first things that came to mind is sitting where I'm sitting and getting these figures every quarter at least. I am surprised and alarmed that the council does not seem to be able to get projections right. Every quarter, we are getting a new set of projected figures. What is worse about those figures is that it's not projecting downwards, which will be a welcoming position if they're projected downwards, they're projecting upwards. When we did the budget scrutiny, 15.9, or let's say for wrong figure, 16 million was the projected overspend. So to my surprise, it's now 24.9, 25 million pounds overspend, projected overspend. And I suspect that these figures are going to be worse because we haven't got period 12 factor in, and unless we have a magic wand to make certain that they go downwards. Temporary accommodation, we know the situation with temporary accommodation. What is shocking for me is that we don't seem to be able to accurately forecast it. And we should be able to, because the last time we were talking about 30 people coming through per month, then 40, whatever. And we should be able to, because if we're going to be good stewards of our finances, we must, one of the basic things that we must get right is to be able to accurately predict what is going to be happening. And those figures are damning. Now, that takes me to the financial position, because I remember during the budget scrutiny, where I was asking the questions about where the money is going to be coming from to plug the gap, etc. I was told that the Capital Financial Reserve had 82 million at the time. The 16 million was going to be taken from that, which was going to leave 66 million. And I'll tell you why I'm going there in a minute. Now, it's 25 million have to be taken from that 82, which is now going to be leaving 57, and according to my calculation, with another figure that I'm aware of, it might then bring us down to 49 million. And the reason I'm quoting these figures, we know from our work we've done on budget scrutiny, there's a 60 million budget gap for the next 2 years. We know what our general fund reserve position is. So when you put the two together, it's indeed an alarming position for we as scrutineer. And we have to be seen to be doing our job and ask the question. So it's going to be about political accountability, and it's going to be about corporate accountabilities in terms of who would take the responsibility and who take the responsibility politically for getting this right. We must be able to get this. And you know what? I know there's a housing crisis out there. So please, we don't want to hear that again. It is. We recognize that. I know there's problem with children's social care. We know the problem with adult social care. What we want to know is what are we doing? What is Newham Council doing to fix the situation, to fix the crisis that we are in? Because we're hemorrhaging money, I think. So I would end there. And I would then ask Zofika to do, if you want, no more than a 2 minutes introduction before I go to our members.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the Commission, and thank you, residents, those listening online. Good evening, I'm Councillor Zulfikar Ali, Cabinet for Finance and Resources. Chair, you have kind of summed up the situation for me. This commission was going to be happening earlier, but because it was delayed, we've taken the opportunity to add the latest position, which is based on period 11. As you rightly said, the spend has increased from 60 million to 25 million. And that is quite rightly, as you said, alarming. I know you said that obviously it is our problem. Clearly, it is our problem, but housing is a national policy failure. I mean, this is happening across the country. You've seen in the report, the other authorities are having similar problems. We're not alone in it, but I agree entirely. This is our problem, and we need to resolve it collectively. And clearly, housing, temporary accommodation is something that is having a biggest impact in that regard. But there are a number of mitigations which are being worked upon. And all I will say at this stage, is that, as you said rightly, that we need to address this issue. We are waiting for DLUC to see in terms of the use of the capital receipts. And we're looking at all avenues to see how best we can reduce the overspend. And the options we're looking at, it could be discretionary spend we have, the growth that we agreed as part of the budget, the strengthening the management control, and looking at all other avenues that we can utilize to make sure that we reduce that. But I would say, Jay, that had we not had the problem TA, our overspend would not have existed. And clearly, this is not a mismanagement of council financial resources. It is a situation which is national, but I agree entirely we need to manage that. But we are looking at, and we'll be coming back to you with a set of proposals as to how we're going to address that totally. Thank you. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Before you go on and before I bring in members, last year, around mid-year, you had a revised budget position where you were hoping to save about 7 million or so or thereabout. Are you predicting, or are you considering having a revised budget position given the state, because this is going to roll over into next year, into this current year that we're in. So by the time we get the outturn figures of last year.
I would say it'd be a revised budget, but as I said earlier, we'll be looking at all aspects of mitigation to address the deficit that we have and bring back the proposal to you.
So I know members are keen to come in, so I recognize Councillor Booker first.
Thank you. In section 1.15, it talks about a reserves position. I wonder whether you tell us what the details of that is. I wonder whether you could tell us the details of the reassessment of the reserves position is, if you have already started to do it, and particularly how that will affect further capital programmes. Because obviously, as we move things from the capital reserves into the general fund, that impacts viability assessments. And along with that, we already said that we were having to do a reassessment of viability based on the move that we'd already done and the reduction of the 20% of the capital reserves. So what is that in terms of now? Where are we?
I'll start. Andrew Ward, Deputy Director of Finance. So this £25 million overspend, it's not a confirmed position yet. We're closing the accounts. We're going through that process. It's our most recent forecast on where we'll finish up. previously we were forecasting that £16 million figure, 15.9, as you correctly said, Chair. And the budget report previously set out how we would, as you correctly said, Chair, fund that from the £82 million capital financing reserve. So the paragraph you referenced, Councillor Booker, is essentially pointing out that we now need to revisit, that decision and make sure that we can either carry on in the same vein and fund that 25 from the capital financing reserve. So that's, a decision we have to make. We've closed our accounts and have the outturn, but clearly it's it's a likely course of action given what we've already said about the existing overspend. How we, that does factor in, I think, to future decisions about capital investment, because having a very large capital financing reserve would enable you to take, to embark on and take on more complex capital projects. I mean, as that gets smaller, as seems very likely as a result of this, it's surely something that all decision makers will have to weigh up, and we need to keep that under constant review. It's not, it makes it less likely you'd take larger, riskier schemes, basically.
We will finalise proposals around metrics on viability for new schemes. As everyone knows, it's a very complex subject, but in summary, our key metric to date has been to ensure that on two measures, the rate of return on capital and the net present value, certain hurdles beaten. Above all else, of course, any scheme should be returning at least a positive net present value, which is clearly a minimum. We will need to look at pushing that benchmark higher for new schemes, precisely to mitigate the kind of risks that you're highlighting. That's not concluded yet, but made about the seriousness of the situation and the pressure we're under. I think the phrasing of it is right. This is a national policy failure that we're bearing the sharp end of it, but we have to find our solutions to that as best we may.
It feels like what would be really good for us to hear, I think, is a really quick look at what our capital spend is going to be, because it obviously needed to be revised anyway when we set the last budget. This is even worse, so there's going to have to be another revision. I know it was also in the peer challenge as well, that having a capital strategy was important, particularly for to be able to see the entirety of it rather than just look at programme by programme as they come to cabinet or to scrutiny or to audit, however they do. Because it feels a little bit as though at the moment we've got quite a large juggernaut kind of just going through in terms of how much we're going to borrow, and we're stretching things as much as we can. We're changing our accounting practices, and we're going to capitalise interest next year, and we're going to do all of those sorts of things to kind of eke it out as much as we can. But we know that there's a crisis coming, budgets. You can see that. At what point do we need to say, actually, this is what our strategy is, and it allows for us actually having no money very soon, if that's what happens, because that is what's happening to lots of local authorities anyway, and we're not somehow magically immune to such things.
No, indeed, we're trying to strike the right balance between keeping investments going that will deliver long-term social and, we hope, financial benefit, whilst at the same time, as clearly the scale of the numbers indicate, being, exceptionally concerned, as you would expect, about the level of risk that poses. So I agree, and we will, and are working on putting that together.
And lastly, can I just say that when we're talking about the 1,500 homes in an agenda item a little bit later, that actually we have this as our backdrop to talking about that, because it does impact whether we're going to be able to actually achieve that, and whether the changes within the capital reserves pot makes a difference in terms of the numbers that we're projecting through the different. I know that only affects some of the, it's not the acquisitions and things, but still.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, one to Councillor Ali and one to Councillor Hamid. As the chair has indicated the figures are not where they should be. And Councillor Ali, in December 2022, very chamber, we had a very constructive and robust exchange about your transformation plan. And then in July last year, I think I quote, you had some very bold plans to get the spending under wraps. What has gone wrong? And being where you are now, what would you have done differently over the past year? And once I get the answer,
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Clearly, the situation is quite dynamic, volatile. I mean, the expenditure on children's services, adult social care, and more importantly, temporary accommodation is not predictable, frankly. I think the numbers have increased in such a fashion that it was very difficult to model. And I know officers have been doing very well in terms of doing whatever they can to model those. The situation we reported at the time was accurate at the point of reporting, but clearly the things have changed. It's very difficult to stop people coming to the door. I mean, you see the numbers on the housing and tier side, how they've changed. And similarly, the children in care, etc., they're coming through. You see in the report exactly how they're moving. We got no control on that. But ultimately, we have statutory responsibility to deliver, and that's why you're seeing this number. If I had the magic wand to say, okay, this is the perfect model, I think I'll be, be somewhere else, I suppose.
I mean, obviously, I've gone back and watched our interaction in the past year. So knowing what you said, what would you have done differently? Because obviously, whatever you've done in your transformation plans have not worked. The spending control, the mitigation, have been in post for nearly 4 years now, I think, obviously have not worked. So what would you do differently? And as we go forward, when you level with the residents about some of the difficult decisions you're going to have to take very soon?
Well, in terms of, I wouldn't agree that the spending controls haven't worked. You can clearly see that the impact of the TA is 25 million alone, and we're looking at 25 million overall across the council. And if you look at the spend, a number of other departments have actually controlled their budgets. They've underspent in order to demonstrate one council approach. So there is that collective approach, and the controls have worked. It's just that the numbers on tier side and also social care and children's services is something that we have not been able to control because that is not within our gift. And what I would have done differently, I don't think there's much we can do other than actually try to be a bit more foresighted to see whether we can predict. There is a danger of over prediction. Sometimes when you over predict, you will come back and say to me, well, your prediction is wrong again. So it's really a balance of where you land the numbers, and I'm sure our officers are professional enough to do forecasting on the basis of well-driven professional models which they are using in order to forecast where we are, rather than being over-ambitious or under-ambitious in a sense, but they're trying to give us accurate reflection. But I think that's where we are.
So based on our interactions over the past year, I would have, in reflection, I would have thought you would have been a lot harder on cutting down on expenditure. And I say that having gone through the budget party process, there was a lot of expenditure there. I think you would admit, in reflection, you could have put the axe down a bit harder than we are today. Just going to go to Councillor Mohammed, okay? Councillor Mohammed, in July last year, you admitted that the Victoria Street decision was having an adverse effect on your budget. In the papers, it sets out that the adverse financial position was known in October and November. In December, the cabinet paper was put through to acknowledge Victoria Street, to remove from circulation 216 homes over a 4-year period, and increase each year by approximately £800,000 over that 4-year period, which would have worsened our current TA position. I know you're in a period of reflection with regards to the call-in. Do you have any reflections on that decision in December, bearing in mind the adverse position of the budget in temporary accommodation today?
Well, I think
as of February.
the main thing is that, again, that gets supplying, and that's when we made that decision. We were looking at getting supply, and then we made that decision on our supply, and we had, you know, the acquisitions programs in place. And like I said, I think we didn't predict the numbers coming through the door and the cost of living crisis. And at the end of the day, the other thing is, again, this is not new and based crisis, it's a national crisis. And we ain't, well, I'm gonna stop you there, we ain't the only borough facing this crisis. And I keep, you know, we keep going back to Victoria Street. We are working on that. We have got mitigation. We are going to be bringing something forward.
As the chair said, we are concerned here about new interactions. What we can do. And I do repeat the question. In July, your officers have said the decanting position on Victoria Street was having an adverse position on your budget. It's making it worse. In October and November, you must have had.
Yeah, but I didn't say.
Let me finish.
Finish. One at a time, please.
You must have had the figures, right? Now, obviously, we're in a reflection mode here, right? Just ask you to try and get some clarity into your thinking. Do you think the decision on Victoria Street was the right one in December when you knew your position was being adverse? But the question is for Councillor Mohammed first to answer and chair the chief executive.
Well, like I said, at that time, we had numbers coming through the door, and again, it's like I said to you last time, at June calling, we made a decision on not being families there. So again, the whole idea of when we were looking to redevelop it is to make that the accommodation more suitable to our needs as a borough. Now, again, when you look at Victoria Street, we had large numbers of family in it, and it was never ideal, and that's what we based that decision on, and that's what we've done.
Thank you. Before I bring in the board members, we in Scrutiny recognize that the problem is not yours, statutory responsibility that you have to fulfill. Our concern, though, is the money. We don't have the money to be spending. And for this year, or at least you're looking at the capital finances, and I just demonstrated, according to my calculation, which may not be correct, I think we're going to come down to about from 82 to about 49. And if we continue like that, in the next 2 years, that might be zero. If that is zero, so the focus on, in terms of answering members' question, is focusing on how do we get out? What would Newham do to get out of the situation? What is the plan to get out? Yeah.
And I agree, Chair. We could debate the exact numbers, and we're still finalising the exact figures for the year. But I think everyone agrees with the broad thrust of the analysis that if the TA pressures continue at this rate, if we continue to see price increases and volume increases at the rate that they have been going, then that will start to pose an impossible problem for the council. There are things that we can and are doing. We can continue to debate that. I think I'm not avoiding the issue at all, as I've said consistently. It's not a problem of our making, but to the extent we possibly can, it's ours to solve. To some extent, you are, trying to take on the London housing market here in solving it just as new. I mean, it will take a national policy solution to deal with the housing pressures that all local authorities around London and the South East. That does not take away our responsibility to mitigate it as best we can. I just think it is really important to add that context over here. Whoever wins the next election, that government is going to have to find a solution for this. Otherwise, they'll see lots of local authorities and families and other organisations falling over from the consequences of it. But I don't dispute the analysis you made.
And I'm not going to come back on that. It's tempting because I'm the chief executive. We have to move in. Abby.
It's going back slightly because I think that there was 2 points that were asked here in relation to reassurance. One was around transformation, one was around review. And I don't want us to spend too much time trying to figure out how to resolve the temporary accommodation crisis. It's not going to be most helpful here. We know that's a significant issue we have to deal with. Firstly, the transformation program the council was talking about was effective. Look at the budgets, it shows you that the temporary accommodation crisis is an homelessness crisis. Secondly, it's about now what do we do as an organisation to move much further and faster, and that's where we are currently. We as an organisation are doing everything we can to transform, and I know we're going to have that conversation at a later date. Those plans are nearly concluded, and hopefully that will provide all of you some reassurance about that, which will look at us significantly becoming smaller as an organisation in a way that doesn't impact on our service delivery in some risky way. Secondly, there is a piece of work that's happening around the review of our capital programme, including developing our capital strategy. We're also having to go back to the drawing board about those growth requests, and that's what we're doing collectively as a leadership team. So I guess what I want to say and to reassure you all is we are just as worried as you all are. We're not standing still, and we're putting together a comprehensive plan to look at what we have to do in the short term and what needs to happen, and that will be imminently, and we will share it collectively.
I hear what you say, and I know you cannot fix the problem here and now, but the residents of Newham, we are speaking, we are the voice of the residents of Newham, and therefore we have to ask the questions. And when we ask those questions, they are gasping for the answers because they want to hear what you as chief exec and the mayor and Councillor Ali, what plans we have. So sometimes you give us some latitude and let us know what it is we're doing. And if we speak in blunt terms, you're leaving them worse off and they get more upset that we're not fixing the problem. The mayor.
If I may, just to build on what's been said, it's everyone's business to deliver the best outcomes for Newham residents, and Scrutiny, yes, rightly has a role to be asking those probing questions, and we welcome those. As has been iterated, there were measures put in place during 23-24 with regards to what we could see as being a significant budget pressure, predominantly TA, but also in aspects relating to health, adult social care and children, young people services with regards to out-of-borough placements, which are costly. There are transformation approaches being worked through in order to bring forward to mitigate against a scale of TA pressure that we could not have anticipated. And please be assured we are asking the questions as members to officers. What could we have done differently in order to have had a much more penetrative diagnosis in order to assess the scale of challenge coming up, then to inform budget setting processes? Abby is absolutely right. We will be revisiting capital spend. We will be needing to revisit issues relating to growth propositions, what are absolutely crucial and critical for the purposes of the sustainability plans of the council for the people of the borough and for this borough as a place. We haven't made any policy-driven growth items, and in addition, it's having to balance those growth items or investment pieces that will help us deliver some aspects which of output which will contribute to alleviating some of the pressures that TA are costing as well. So housing remains important, but we're not going to do it and consider housing in isolation of the financial position of the council and the round. And it will go through a process, as you would rightly expect, of political discussions with the cabinet, with each cabinet member, and then it will go across to different arenas, including a political arena, because we would want to have conversations with our political colleagues before any decisions are made, and Scrutiny will have a role to play in that.
Thank you. I've seen many members now. Is it on the back of the mayor? Okay. Yeah.
It's just a slight correction. I think in your comment and your reflection, it was almost considering the needs of residents. We absolutely are. Right now, what I'm saying to you in the clearest terms is we are doing everything collectively to deal with the issues before us, and and to ensure it's in the best interest of our residents. So I just needed to include that because I'm mindful that it seemed as if it was separate and then care. We're here to serve the residents.
And Liz and then Susan.
Thank you.
Terry.
Thank you. On that, both of those, I think we'd already heard your one actually during the budget process, and I think that was really useful, and it was really good to kind of hear how quickly that's going to be progressing. I also want to say thank you. That's probably the first time I feel that we've really heard that there's also going to be a strong political element to that, because it has felt slightly as though, and without, you know, with all of the respect in the world, Conrad, the comment about the future government, it has felt slightly like we've been holding our breaths for some future change to happen.
Yeah.
And we know that that's not going to, you know, we have to move quicker than that. We can't possibly do that. And so I think what I would be really grateful to hear is what the timescale is on that piece of work, and particularly kind of the big. We already know that corporately there's going to be big changes. The big changes politically in terms of the policy-driven stuff, whether that's growth or cuts of policy areas as well. When's that going to happen too? Would be useful.
There will be some alignment in terms of the corporate, as in organisational consideration of this, in order to provide us information so we can have informed and considered political conversations as a cabinet and executive. But I have made it clear to Abby, to Conrad, to Zulfika, it needs to happen sooner rather than later. This is not a Q3 discussion. This is not a discussion that is part of mobilising in anticipation of setting the budget for 25-26. It has to happen as soon as practically as possible. And I am happy to bring back in writing, because I will be wanting to socialise it more broadly in any case with a wider membership, the wider member body of which I am part of, i.e. my political group, some of the pretty tough choices we're going to need to be making. So that's as definitive as I can be for now, but I imagine I will be presenting clarity to cabinet members and the wider executive, certainly in the period in the run-up to or around the council ACM, because I would want to be making a position statement around that time in any case.
Chair, can I suggest that that's something that we note as wanting to look back on then in the next year? Whoever is chair, I'm not suggesting you'll necessarily be chair then.
It's just to support the mayor in what she was saying. So there are proposals that will be presented to the mayor and executive soon. We can come back with the final timeline, but it is a plan prepared for.
Thank you. Susan.
Two really quick points. Firstly, Abby, you were talking about the residents being at part of our thoughts. One of the criticisms that Budget Working Party made was the lack of consultation of residents in the budget cycle. And so I'm just wondering how we're planning to put that right. And secondly, what concerned me reading the papers for this meeting is I was really confused about where a lot of this information came from, because a lot of it seemed to reveal stuff that was known around the time Budget Working Party was sitting, but wasn't shared with us. I mean, suddenly we hear that there were presentations up to 50 a month. I mean, in Budget Working Party, we were being told they'd hit 40. We said, I don't remember the figure 50 being mentioned. And also, it's a shame that the Health and Adults team shot out of the room after their previous item, because it appears, again, from the papers, that there's detail of a situation with Active Newham that we weren't made aware of, that's starting to sort of seep out now. And I'm just kind of confused as to where this information is. I mean, one of the criticisms we made again in the Budget Working Party report was about the number of inaccuracies. And here again, you know, going through the papers, we've got officer names of officers who've now left the council that are still in. So there's that criticism as well. And I'm just wondering, with the whole peer review process now and the changes we're making around the way we handle finance, how much of these papers that we read in advance of this meeting are still accurate? So a number of points there. So
Conrad.
So we haven't kept any information from Scrutiny. Same information has been made available. What you have on temporary accommodation, and we talked about a little bit of difficulties in the pace.
Can you speak up a bit, Conrad?
Pace of change in price that is driving the change in the forecasts that we've seen. Had we known that at the time of setting the budget, we would of course reported that position. But I just want to be completely clear that we've always reported equally to Cabinet and to Scrutiny the best information known at the time. I agree that there are issues with the extent to which we've been able to keep up with the very rapidly moving situation on temporary accommodation. If you think there's any factual inaccuracies in the paper, please do let me know and I'll get them corrected.
Rabbi.
I'll just pick up question 1, and then I think Darren's going to come in for the question around housing numbers. So in relation to the consultations, the mayor and the executive have agreed to budgeting process earlier to ensure that we can station with residents. We will be putting proposals in terms of the timeline, but that is work has been accepted. Ensure that can happen. Station process with our residents.
Are you going to be coming in, Darren?
I was just going to say the discussion of budget work in past about the accommodation driving the price increase, and you're very against where we thought it would hit per month. So if you look at it varies every month, so we're just trying to average out the course of the last 6 months.
I just don't remember 50 being mentioned as a figure, because that's quite a considerable leap up. I mean, we were being told that, you know, while it hit 40, you felt 30 was sort of reasonable, and we had to really push you to accept 40 as a kind of basis for calculation as part of our process. And now we're hearing it was actually up at 50 while budget wasn't budgeting.
So Councillor Masters is right. We were told 30, and then we went to 40. Then we know that when it was that, we had to adjust the figures, or we were told the figures would have to be adjusted by 3 million upwards. And so is there inaccuracies in these figures? And if it's known, if it was known at the time, at least if you have told us then, we would have digested and it would have formed part of a reporting, but then we wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. So table 2 in the report, it starts on the bottom of page 9. It tells the nightly numbers in nightly booked accommodation, which is the cohort that drives the cost. There is a column marked nightly change there. You'll see a 27 in the row for April, 25 for May, and so on. The March figure at the top of page 10 there is 40, but that is an estimate. That is not because the report was written before that figure was known. Average for that column is 26.67. And I do recall really clearly that a lot of the budget working for TA was based on this figure of 30. You know, an average increase per month of 30. Clearly, as colleagues have said, you know, that number moves around a bit. It's a volatile environment. But I mean, I think the average of 27 is not sort of so far from the reasonable used for.
But sorry to interrupt, Andrew. If I'm looking at page 37.4.2, you're saying in October and November, so ahead of budget working party, you had more than 50 cases. So this should have come to us, but that didn't we?
You know, so a monthly figure and, you know, a trend and an average. You know, we know there'll be.
But 2 months though, that's quite a big.
But, sorry, with respect, you've picked out there the 2 months out of 12 with the highest numbers. If we take, for example, the average of the last 6 months, it's just very fractionally under 30, 29.87, I think. Of course, the numbers bump around each month. That's why the trend is important.
But these would have been the two most recent months coming into, because Budget Working Party really only got down to business in January because we were waiting for the reports to come through. So I would have expected October and November to have been quite crucial months, given that maybe the December figures were still being sort of worked through at that point. So I'm just really surprised that we never heard this figure of 50 at any point. I mean, my colleagues are sort of every bit.
Yeah, and I think
My advice is focus on the
point
trend.
has been made that we need to move on. Liz, sorry, you, it's, Thelma, then Terry, you've had to go, so I'm going to bring it Thelma, and then Rita, then Terry.
All right, I appreciate that it ain't gonna be a simple answer to my question, but as a custom house councillor with the custom house regeneration going on page 79, it talks about the different regenerations and especially the custom house regeneration that doesn't overspend, and I believe my understanding is because of delays. And from what is written in this report, delays mean that contractors have to be paid higher salaries and inflation and all of that. So we're just getting more and more expensive delays. So what is causing these delays and how can we mitigate against them?
Which page?
79.
79. So
If we can get these regenerations done, we can have our housing, we can lower the costs that we're spending on this housing.
Just to get it on the right reference, I appreciate you're going on the sort of large page numbers in the printed agenda. Could someone just help us out with the reference electronically? Is that in Appendix 4?
Or 4.4, maybe that might help.
is it Appendix?
It's 4.4 in the paper.
Is it Appendix 4?
It is.
So yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Appendix 4.
It's appendix 4.
Okay, 4.4.
Look at this.
Yeah. I've got.
The custom house scheme in particular you wanted to discuss, yeah?
Yes.
The expenditure.
Sorry, which section are you referring to?
4.4.
Sorry to ask.
For inclusive economy and
And it's the community overspend relates to custom house regeneration scheme. It's on the top of, it's just there, here. So you've got the
Okay.
table 4.4 and then the next page at the top. And it just relates to the overspend of
I've got it, but I can't see it.
variance.
Someplace 17.
Table. So the variance of 0.2.
Your delays in custom house.
And movement 5.0, that's custom house regeneration. So it's the CW line. And then it's that. That's it. It's
Thank you,
custom
Ralph,
house.
CWE.
Yeah.
Sorry if you've taken time to locate it. Sorry. Okay, Paul Kitson, Inclusive Housing and Culture Director, started a couple of weeks ago. Nice to meet you. Can I give you a written response on that, please? I don't have details to hand, but I'll give you a written response tomorrow. Thank you.
That to be okay. Rita?
Two questions. I'll take one as the first one as a written response. Councillor Zorfi, Councillor Ali, at several points during the budget working meeting, we discussed the issue of Custom House and whether it should be transferred away from children's services so it didn't appear on their budget line into corporate assets. Now, I appreciate the decision clearly has been taken because it still appears on that portfolio. Could you, however, provide us with a written reasoning about how you came to the decision that it should stay where it is? Because otherwise, I will be asking this question again and again.
I should try, sorry, go ahead.
Can I just deal with that one? I mean, we've just kept the financial reporting consistent through the year, rather than sort of move things around. I think it's been very, very clear and everyone has agreed that the best place for the asset to be managed from would not be in children's services. So that's taking effect. It's just you've got the reports for the sort of current year and we haven't updated which line we put the issue in.
Very much, that's it. The second question was around active Newham and the exit costs from that contract. Now, we knew we were commissioning, we knew procurement was coming up. Exactly. Can you give us some colour as to why we've got higher than anticipated exit costs from a contract that we knew was coming to an end and that we were following the procurement process for.
Andrew?
What did we do? Forget to the photocopy list or?
So I may have to look into that in more detail for you, councillor. I mean, this has come to light and been reported at the available opportunity, which is the period 11 monitoring for CAP. So it was not in the reporting previously. I quite agree.
We'll provide you written response.
Yes, the mayor.
Oh, no, I was going to come in on the Debden House, but it's been addressed.
Okay, Terry, and I'm going to run this up in the next few minutes by 8:30.
You gave a very good explanation about the ambition, about this new process of looking at temporary accommodation. Tonight, on a number of occasions, it seems we were caught unaware by the scale challenge. But I'll be honest, I don't accept, and I'm going to explain why. We have the highest rate of private sector housing in London. Therefore, we should have planned for higher rate of Section 21. We have a very vulnerable transition population. We could have, therefore, our sensitivity to those market factors is high. Bearing in mind, we're going into a stagflation recession. We could have predicted the scenarios, right? Therefore, in terms of the approach you're taking, Chief Exec, in terms of the corporate brain, how are we frameworking those risks? So we make a decision, but we have a very good habit of making. But bearing in mind, there are different scenarios, different ways of looking at the market. How are we as a corporate body accepting that challenge? Are we using scenario analysis? Are we using sensitivity analysis? How are we quantifying the risk of change in the market? So we get whatever decision we make to the cabinet, it's appropriate. And there are other options on the table.
I can answer that very quickly, Chair.
So,
I think everyone knows that in council, it's probably one of our biggest. So we are setting up, which I think sits in 2 weeks, if I'm correct. I think just putting all of this together. What our coordinated approach is, what is our long-term plan, what is our short-term plan, what we need to do across the council, and what we need to consider doing differently, and we'll be getting expert advice. We do think that this work with an organisation.
That background
And I will be chairing it, if that's it.
Yeah, that background baseline, that will be shared before the decision. Right.
So that will be the instrument by which we'll be able to give sound and robust and collective advice to the mayor and executive, which we haven't been great at, but we are improving because collectively it's not just an issue for Gavin and Canada, they've done an excellent job, it's an issue for us all collectively, the council. And because of the significance of the issue, I will be the person chairing that.
okay, thank you.
If I may, I mean, in addition, provide an assurance, the rigour and the interrogation, as you would expect, you as member of scrutiny or any other committee, when you're considering a matter which requires interrogation before any decision or determination is made, or indeed any suggestions or recommendations, is equally applied from member side at executive cabinet level. And I mean, certainly in the context of how I approach material that's been provided, I triangulate across a range of metrics. And clearly in this instance, we only know what we know, i.e. what we're told, notwithstanding what we will also point out, i.e. a new and specific context. Yes, you are right. There is a character of Newham where the majority of our residents live in the private rented sector. It will be sensitive to market shifts, changes and vulnerabilities. Similarly, there is a almost unique character of Newham with regards to our no recourse to public funds profile. I know that there is a particular heightened presentation in terms of those that whose asylum applications are approved under a particular age, younger, single, and that has an impact in terms of the money that they receive, and how that then correspondingly has an impact in terms of what we can provide, because we don't have the ability to do rent caps, etc., etc. But diligence on those questions are being asked, and it is accepted that there needs to be an additional rigour and a heightened sophistication around the information that then is put through the sausage machine in order for us to be more rigorous around the modelling and the projections.
Just a supplementary here. With regards to policy on housing eligibility and policy on temporary accommodation on all its guises, are we out of kilter with other East London and North London boroughs? I mean, are we a magnet for people? And if are you looking to change our policies, eligibility? I'm
going to ask some specificity in terms of the question you're asking. If it relates to flows vis-a-vis asylum seekers, refugees, that's a very separate question to a legal regime that we've got to comply with as it relates to coming to the council, presenting as homeless.
Yeah, I see the, temporary accommodation policy eligibility and our eligibility to our housing stock as a continuum. And I just wondered whether we are out of kilter with other boroughs, which is part of our...
Yeah. Chair, through you, Chair, is it okay if Candida comes in to respond?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually it's not a continuum, it's two separate, there's two separate things, and there's two separate parts of legislation. So our housing waiting list comes under part 6 of the Housing Act legislation, and that is the eligibility for the residents and how we manage and our waiting list and access to our allocation scheme. People who are homeless have a reasonable preference to go onto that waiting list, that they go onto the 38,000 residents that's run that one. And that has very separate sort of eligibility. And the first thing that people have to live in the borough 3 years unless they come under some certain criteria.
Other boroughs have different eligibility.
Seems to be having a two-way conversation there, and I need to move on.
I'm trying to get to is our policy are we out of kilter, and in this review are we looking at restoring balance?
Finish my response, sorry. The homelessness comes as part 7 of the Housing Act, and that is extremely clear, legally defined why we have to accept people as homeless, and there is very clear criteria. So that is what we assess people on, and that is how we accept people, and they have to go into temporary accommodation. That isn't related to our housing waiting list. Now, I can talk to you about our allocation scheme and how it compares with other boroughs, and it compares quite similarly to other boroughs. Some other boroughs, it can go from 2 years local connection to 5 years local connection. But the point is that doesn't make any difference to the amount of people that we are putting in temporary accommodation. And that is not a local policy. That's to government legislation, national.
Chair, sorry, was just, are we looking at alternative models? What else we can do if it happens?
Yeah, I'm going to be running up here. We have opinions in this one. Shabs and Councillor Mohammed. Can I say in terms of the temporary accommodation crisis you're facing, Scrutiny did make some recommendation, and one of those recommendations I believe, is the 90 minutes, to look at extending that 90 minutes to beyond, so that the scrutiny is trying to be helpful to help you solve the problem. And it's up to the executive in deciding, but if you ask me and you want my advice, 120 minutes or there or even beyond. Once the person is not working, and once they don't have kids within the area, then I think that's fair to house them for the to discharge our responsibility. That's one. Victoria Street. Scrutiny held with some suggestion in that, in saying keep Victoria Street, keep the 216 units, spend the 7 million to make it suitable for housing, and take the 50 million, if you like, to build a brand new building if you want. I know that is under consideration, and that you're going to be coming back to us in the May. You're going to let us know. But I just saying, for the purpose of this meeting, we try to help your housing crisis there. And the residency status, in terms of how long people take, and you and the chief exec reminded us just now, it's 3 years. Some barrier is 5 and 7, and scrutiny. Some of us in scrutiny urge that it moves from 3 years, because that does have an effect. Because if you're you have a short residency and you're here, etc., somehow, sometimes, some district through and people end up in terms of temporary accommodation. So those are all some suggestions to help you. And I know you.
I was going to say, on the first point, we are looking at that, and we are due to go to cabinet in the summertime.
Yes.
So, and the other thing is, we're going to look at the residency policy and review that as well.
You won't get an argument from me there, because I'm fully agreeable with those.
That was, if you look at it, that was part of the budget mitigation that we did.
Yeah. So,
Chair, let's make a last comment. It won't be long.
Last.
Thank you. I suppose it's probably to Conrad and Andrew. Could be where, and I've really appreciated, and I know that I've already said this, the kind of the honesty that we're going to be really having to bring things up a pace. You did say at the beginning that the pressures on TA are, if they keep on going, they are just insurmountable. That's the end of it. I think we do also need to, and even if it's not in a public setting, we do also need to have some real honesty around actually if this keeps on happening, even if we do make all of the cuts that we're expecting, even if we do really look at actually where are we financially in terms of the council being able to keep standing and providing the essential services to residents. And I feel as though that hasn't always been completely transparent within papers. And I'm not suggesting that there's a desire to hide things, but I do think there needs to be a little bit more on that.
We'll set out those longer term estimates with, regrettably, of course, all the usual sort of caveats and uncertainties, but yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Can I just make one contribution back to that residency point?
Yes.
Even if you have to do 5 years, that doesn't impact on the number of people going into separate accommodation. So we just need to clarify those 2 points.
I do understand it, but we talk about that outside. My thinking around that, yeah. Yeah, thank you. I ask members to note.
Noted.
Can I make a suggestion that given the seriousness of this, that we actually need to budget to help?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Oh, you're
so, can you so you're proposing, okay, so what is being proposed that given the seriousness of the finances, that the Budget Working Commission be reconvened to look at the finance situation on a regular basis, that to be determined by overview and scrutiny. Does the committee agree to that?
Agrees.
Agreed.
Sure.
So it's agreed that Budget Commission would be reconvened to undertake detailed analysis of.
Chair. That's a really good, helpful suggestion from Councillor Shadow. Can I ask you in your deliberations with the Mayor and Chief Executive, to discuss the issue of it's Liz's point about access to papers. If we are to start the budget commission, there's no point in getting papers late. And the other one is we can't get access to the papers until Cabinet's seen them. A helpful suggestion came by the budget working party, but you could just send the papers to the Cabinet and then you can give it to us the next day. So really what I'm asking for is some agility, Zulfika, in the papers, not to hold on to them. And, you know, Liz's point is a really, really great point, because we are in a serious situation, but we want to be constructive and to put ideas on the table and to have those deliberations. Share just some consideration in that process. We are all in this together, right? And I think
in the way that we've done with the report for tonight, I mean,
absolutely. And that's a change, and this is a change, and more should be welcomed, please, because it does take a little bit of temperature downwards if we don't have to be drawing papers out of the executive like hen's teeth.
Yeah. And I do know sometimes the executive is hesitant in terms of giving papers if they haven't properly been thought out. To help Zulfika, I don't mind, and we don't mind having it on green paper so that we meet and look at it under the guise of green paper.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Paul took my words out of my mouth. I was going to say we're all in it together, and clearly the role the scrutiny is playing and the budget commission is playing is very, very important, and the suggestions are equally important. So nothing is off the table, and clearly, as this report demonstrates, we have put things in there which haven't been to the Cabinet yet because, you know, because of it's delayed. We felt it's important. We know that we have the figure, therefore we bring it to your attention so we can have a process for scrutinization. So we hopefully will carry on with that process. Thank you.
If you are minded to reconvene the scrutiny, else when have in mind.
We have a meeting on the 9th. So we will Chase will think about it on the 9th meeting, which is just less than 3 weeks. We could come with a
proposed date,
proper announcement here. So, and then we can get the terms of reference and everything set up here.
Just also for clarification, noting that we're nearing the end of this municipal year and there will be an annual council to determine the committee membership, and that will also involve scrutiny. How will this work in the context of the development of the scrutiny work programme, with an eye to the agility point that's been raised? But I do also want to make a point. It is important that myself and Cabinet also have the opportunity to discuss and consider without hampering agility. So I think there just needs to be some appropriate balanced flex as part of the mutual respect.
And I'm always respectful of that. And I suppose because everyone is aware that we're coming to the end of the municipal year and we're going into a new one. All of these our turns would have an impact in the current in-year position. But when a budget working commission is reconvened, it should be looking at the now in-year position, because these figures would be history. And that is in keeping, I suppose, with what Abir said and what scrutiny asks for. We should be involved much earlier in the process. It will make for better scrutiny and a more collaborative working if we're all in it together so that we can help with the solutions.
Can I just make a suggestion? Just what we said, both of what we've and also what we've said earlier on this evening in relation to the programme of work that's about to be developed. Could possibly officers support in terms of thinking about how this could realistically work in line with all the other work that's happening? Yeah. Would that be okay? Rather than you proposing to us, so it's not out of kilter in terms of what we're trying to do. Yeah, it's just a proposal.
But that's why we're bringing it back in May. So by then we would have some discussion and see how best we can this will work to the benefit of the council.
I can work something up on that will deal with the issues that have been raised, and also the role of the audit committee, for example. That they look at in-year delivery of savings. I'm not sure that's consistent with the current proposal. So let us go away and work out something that tries to reconcile all of those all of those points and more.
Thank you. We need to move on now to item 6 on the original agenda, which is the organizational performance and delivery of building a fairer Neon.
You want to go?
It's on page 23 to 30 on the agenda book. And the purpose of this item is to consider the council's performance to deliver the council objectives. Neon. I ask the officers concerned. I have James Portis and the mayor listed here and Councillor Mohammed. James or the mayor, do you want to?
Can I suggest, just in the interest of time, you'll have noted the papers for this agenda item, including the housing delivery focus, that we just open up to questions and we'll take by you, Chair, each question, and then we'll just coordinate who responds.
Yep, thank you. Members, I have Councillor Charter and Paul.
Thank you, James. Have a focus on housing. 2 questions around methodology that I'd like to ask. You said on page 5 that the resident survey is affected by external factors. Now, whilst I totally understand why that is that a cop out? Is that a cop out for say that actually we aren't where we need to be on resident satisfaction, and it's all because it's somebody else's fault. The outside world, it's not us. That was one. Second question, more on a practical point. You said 17, I think it was, homeless street sleepers were found in January. Is that chain data, or is that we've gone out as a council to find individuals? Just imagine the most of the first, please.
No, Mayor.
Chair, I mean, on those 2 questions, if it's okay with you, I'll pass over to James Portis, but if I can just make one short contribution to the first question around cop-out. My understanding of how that's been presented is, in summary or in broad terms, there will always be, regardless of how robust methodology is around capturing sentiment or feeling and perception of residents across a range of different areas, something that could skew their feeling on any given particular day or moment where they're being interviewed. That's how I'm reading it, but through the chair, James.
Yeah, I'll probably take the first question that relates to housing delivery, so I might hand over if that's okay. So I think, building on the mayor's point, the outcome measures that the resident survey records, they are deliberately macro and large in scale, and what the council is measuring through that, and there's other macro measures in the corporate plan, like employment rates, for example, or the cost of housing. There's choices the council can make in how these things are monitored and measured. And, if you want to take a limited view about the role of the council and stay away from measuring those macro outcomes, you wouldn't really pay attention to or measure those really significant local, regional, national changes that absolutely do have a bearing on our policy decisions. So what we're highlighting there is we are being bold in the way we're kind of developing the outcomes framework to measure the right things, measuring things like resident satisfaction, measuring economic change in the borough, measuring perceptions of crime and safety, measuring feelings of community connectedness, etc. Deliberately, and that's a kind of positive decision the council has made. It is a general position on those sorts of outcomes, particularly on the macro outcomes, that those are affected as much as they almost equally or to a greater extent by what the council is doing to kind of affect change in those outcomes, but equally by what is happening within the London economy, for example, or the impacts of cost of living. If you record the last quarterly report on the resident survey, it really did highlight the significant impact, for example, the cost of living crisis was having on residents and household perceptions of affordability of housing costs and financial well-being. I think
I would interpret the kind of deliberate inclusion of those big metrics, despite the fact they are challenging to affect change on, as positive aid to kind of measure and track those things. And while we're doing that, we're just acknowledging the fact that these outcomes can be shifted and affected by a whole range of complex factors. Now, one way of looking at it is that it's potentially a cop out of accountability. I'll encourage everyone to think about them as a kind of positive decision to measure things that are hard to measure and sometimes challenging in terms of the feedback they give us around what our residents are experiencing.
Thank you. Terry.
Yeah, I've got a second question about the housing numbers, the streets of sleepers.
Roughly 6.
Yeah, I think I can answer that question now.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, every 2 months usually about the last Thursday, there are 5 teams assemble at Dockside and go out, and each team has an professional outreach worker and a volunteer or a counsellor, and they go out on 5 rounds that are mapped out by locations that outreach workers have reported where rough sleepers have been found. And so all these locations are visited within 3 hours, midnight to 3 o'clock. Usually we finish earlier, and they're collated and reported every 2 months. Once a year, that method is used to send the statistics to ONS. So, I mean, we do think it's pretty accurate. There could be somebody pops up somewhere they've never been seen before and it's not known, but the methodology used, as I've explained, we think captures it pretty accurately.
But Chair, I would actually question, why are we doing it when we've got chain data? If we've got a database that's used London-wide that captures this information, why are we doing this? And we can never hope with 5 teams as good as they are to capture everywhere, can we?
I think it's to capture at a given moment in time. You know, and they are sleeping on that particular night. It's captured in time rather than collated over time.
I think, Chair, just the answer to that question just raises more concerns with me about methodology and what's underpinning some of our research.
Okay. So obviously, John, the council member is not satisfied. So should I suggest that we take this outside there to develop and get
Our sleeping team to come back and answer that. So two different pieces of data there.
Yeah, I'm gonna the schedule for both in Scrutiny, so maybe we can get that submitted.
Written.
Yeah. Okay.
Can we move standing orders?
Yeah, so we're going to I'm going to propose
Chair, I agree, standing orders proposed.
is that agreed to 9:30 latest?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Right, Terry.
Yeah, obviously, we've got 132 corporate delivery commitment, 35 outcome, 25. As per the peer review, are we on track to develop that new corporate plan, which we'll review in the next?
So we can go into 2 things. So can I just summarise? The peer review did not ask us to create a new corporate plan.
Oh, no, to summarise.
What it asks for us to do is to review and prioritise how we deliver the plan. And that piece of work is happening. You're looking at me, I'm the chief executive in those meetings.
That looks like to me a new corporate plan in my world.
But it's not. I think the reality is that we have the right corporate plan and it talks about the right things and it sets the right agenda for what we want to deliver for the borough, and it is aligned with the cabinet and the executive and the mayor have put forward. We're committed to it. What they've asked us to do is think about what we need to deliver when, but it's happening as part of the action.
Next quarter.
Hey, Susan.
I just wanted to mention something that had actually come to my scrutiny. We now have a remit on equalities. We were looking at the equalities data that underpinned the performance report. And one of the concerning things that we picked up was that there are 2 communities who seem to be particularly unhappy or, you know, more unhappy than other parts of our community across a variety of targets, and those two communities were firstly those who are feeling disabled and identify as and then the other community seemed to be sort of generally less happy with life in Newham was the Muslim community. So I'm just wondering, I wanted to share this information with the wider overview and scrutiny committee who weren't present at that meeting, but just how we're sort of planning to address that, because one of the shortcomings we found with the equalities data was that it wasn't really sort of looking at education levels of the people who were responding or their kind of financial status or any of those other indicators that might have indicated which parts of those communities weren't as happy with life in Newham and where this might be coming from. So I'm just wondering what work we're going to be undertaking to address that, because that to us felt pretty serious.
Happy to come back on that.
Yeah, no, go on.
So yeah, I think personally, having been at that particular committee and commission meeting, the piece of work that we undertook to support that report was actually incredibly useful for us, because it drew out kind of disproportionate impacts and intersectional findings around experiences in Newham that, when looking at one particular question or one particular theme, weren't prominent in the kind of public reporting we'd produced prior. And just the practical work that's following on from that is the learnings and insight from that particular survey is informing the annual qualitative research programme that follows, and that's going to involve further qualitative engagement with user groups, focus groups made up of representative residents with those characteristics. A key question we asked in the survey was whether or not participants are willing to be contacted for that research. We had quite a good take-up of that. So that's directly feeding into our research programme, thanks to the input of that committee, and it's really helpful. We're also feeding in the richness of findings from that particular report and the resident survey into the service planning process for the year. Heads of service directors and commissioners across all council services have been sent the resident survey findings. We're holding internal workshops to share those sorts of insights. We're challenging internal services to kind of keep those inequalities much more prominently in mind when developing their service plans and commissioning plans for the year. And I think that'd be a useful thing perhaps to kind of summarise and bring back to future relevant topics. But it's a really helpful piece of work. I just want to say it's a really helpful piece of work.
Okay, thank you, Liz.
So actually, first of all, Chair, are we moving on to the housing paper?
That is part of the paper, and
yeah, I just didn't know whether other people had more questions on this part. I don't want to make it confusing. If you're happy for me to ask the questions.
I'm happy.
Thank you.
And that paper is and on the supplementary agenda that Liz is referring to.
Yeah. This might sound like I'm trying to, I've actually just genuinely forgotten what social rented homes means. So if you could remind me about what social rented homes means for the 1,000 that we had said that we would do, that would be helpful. It's useful in the 500 acquisitions that it talks about acquisitions since 22 and acquisitions being progressed before 26. In the 1,000 homes, it doesn't have a timescale on like that, but I assume it's a similar timescale, but just wanting to check, because there isn't a timescale on it, that we are within, what the timescale is for that 1,000 and whether we're on track, particularly bearing in mind what we spoke about before in terms of the delivery through Populo possibly being affected by our own internal finances. So that would be good to get kind of some understanding of whether we're still on track because of that as well.
Can I answer both those?
Yes, please.
So colleagues might be able to help on the social. So social rent is council rent. It's the most affordable, as in the cheapest level of rent in terms of affordable housing tenure. So that's the sort of third question. These commitments in the paper are about starts by the middle of 26. And the paper outlines the mixed model approach of delivery, which is the three strands of either acquisitions, HRA direct delivery, or through Populo. In some way, those three things come together to mitigate risk, some of the risks that are outlined in the report as well. So the message from this report, I suppose, is that we are on track, in fact, to make those starts by 2026, both through acquisitions and both through new build as well. And it highlights a few of the risks at the back of the paper.
And are these numbers before we've had to do the reforecasting that Conrad was talking about before, not reforecasting, that's the wrong word. But the relooking at what's the word that I'm looking for, Conrad?
I think I can anticipate the question, but if I've got it wrong, tell me.
Don't worry.
The current programme.
Yeah.
This is what we're aiming to do. This is a commitment that's been made politically. This is the stuff that's in train. If through the course of this year, through the budget monitoring process, there's a reevaluation of those political and other priorities, then we'll revisit this.
No, that's helpful.
Where we're heading.
Okay, because I think that there would have already have been a relook having to happen based on the budget that we have set, because that was mentioned in the Section 25 statement that we'd need to do that. So I assume that this is linked to that that's already happened.
It's just worth sort of clarifying that the capital financing reserve that we're talking about in the earlier item relates to a number of regeneration type schemes, many of which will complete over a longer time frame than 2026. So, you know, as Paul Kitson says, you know, this is the current programme against that 1,500. It may indeed need to change, as any budget may need to change in accordance with changing circumstances, but this is the current position against that. As we update in respect to the conversation we had earlier on risks, that may affect this, but is perhaps more likely to feed into kind of longer term things as well.
Down the line,
If you start a new scheme now, frankly, you're not going to build very much before 2026. You know, to be blunt about it.
Helpful, thank you.
Chair, can I didn't hear half, can I ask for clarity?
Sorry, Councillor.
So fine, I like it. Am I right in hearing that, yes, there is a manifesto stroke political commitment for X number of houses? However, we might have to reprofile the capital budget, which will mean the political ambition might have to be downscaled. Is that some of the discussion between?
Well, yes, I mean, you know, of course, as we update financial information, politicians then make choices in accordance with that, you know, and we provide the information to enable them to do that. That might affect this or it might affect other programmes, and those will be matters for political decision making.
If I may add, in the context of the budget spend of a council, it is not 100% driven by policy, determination and framework, i.e. a manifesto as iterated in a corporate plan. There are also decisions with regards to what the corporate body believes in the context of capital spend is a priority. Everything would need to be considered in the context of the budget pressures that we're currently facing vis-a-vis TA, and those determinations and discussions will happen as part of a considered approach.
I think, Mayor, that's a useful comment there. I would say over the past 18 months, 2 years, there has been like an implication where, how can I put this? Things are being done because it's a manifesto commitment rather than, let's say, there has been that inference, which I've picked up at various meetings.
Yeah.
So well, thank you for clarifying.
And the other really important point, my expectation on anything that the council does in terms of money it spends has to conform and align to an outcome as iterated in the outcomes-based performance framework, and also aligned to the corporate plan, i.e. we've got a political vision about people and place in this borough, and money spent should be demonstrating that it's meeting those outcomes.
I have seen reports, Mayor, where it has said due to social objectives rather than financial, this decision has been made. An inference has been in order to deliver a manifesto commitment. So I'm willing, but thank you for clarifying the point. I think it's very important what you just said there.
Thank you. Earlier, another discussion, you mentioned that they will have to be, given our financial situation, a political rethink. And James, turning to you, the transformation program underpin the delivery of some of our key pillars in terms of building a fairer Newham. How is that affected or contributing to getting us out of the situation that we are in?
Happy to defer to the chief executive.
Chair, I know this came in as a supplementary question about 2 days ago. I think that this is probably for a fuller conversation at another time. So as described, there is a programme of work that's really aligning all of our transformation programme, including looking at our future transformation programme over the next 2 to 3 years. We'll be going to Cabinet and Executive, which we want to see. And I'm happy to come and chair it once that has been reconciled with scrutiny. So it's taking into consideration all of this. Can I just make one comment, because it's aligned to this and also what Councillor Paul and the Mayor were saying, is that we just need to understand that we exist in a context where agility will have to be the norm for us as an organisation for the next.
Brilliant. Chief Executive, has been most likely a breakdown in communication, because I asked for this more than a week ago. So between the scrutiny office, I suppose, and your office, there's some blockage, because it shouldn't have been 2 days ago, because I was expecting the answers to be here this evening, because we had a detailed discussion with officers, and I said, yes, we do need to talk about it at this meeting. But I hear what you say, and so therefore I look forward to having a discussion about the transformation at large.
With a more meaningful and engaging response, but it was received 2 days.
I suppose that need to be on our agenda when we next speak about breakdown in communication from the time we request it to the time it's out to get in to your office or the mayor office sometimes and getting back to us. Okay, thank you. Right, so given the time, I would move on from this item. Can I ask members to note the paper? And we now move on to the next item, which is the local plans, the report.
Okay, this is just.
Can I ask Councillor Paul?
Thank you, Chair.
This item.
So I want to say thank you to the Mayor, Jane Custis, and Ellie Cooper-Thomas.
And Jane Custis.
Jane, I'll have to shout, sorry. I just want to say thank you. It was a really good session. It was so good. I think the Mayor wanted a third meeting, and it's still outstanding on strategic housing, how that fits the local plan. What I will say, the past group came about because of some outstanding questions by members. And it was an attempt by myself to put the questions together and have some order about that. In terms of the recommendations, the first one was on affordable housing, and what that attempts to do is bring some clarity and some cohesion and actually some knowledge to members as well. I think at the same time, for context, there was a green motion which went through council, which was amended by the Labour group about affordability. So we had some discussions about that. And I think in that meeting, actually, there was some, between the three political parties, there was some common understanding, I think, between us. The second one, on places of worship, what we did find, there was a very good faith forum, which has got details of all the faith communities and key people. What we suggested in our recommendation too, but we used that faith forum at another level to go out and talk to different faith communities about the local plan. There is some sort of, I use the word nervousness about the local plan, or it does affect certain communities about the places of worship. And there was representations from the Muslim community and also from the newer established Black African churches. They had different dynamics, obviously due to the way they established themselves in Newham. And what we felt was that the Faith Forum, using its great contacts already, just to use it as a communication vehicle to allay any fears about the local plan and to guide and preach about the local plan, really, to say how it can be quite beneficial. And also one of the things we use places of worship. And there was a particular section where Ellie came and gave a very good explanation about community spaces, about places of worship. And I think our members of the committee we learn a great deal about the nuance around those issues as well. And the other one we talked about was burial spaces as well, actually. Obviously, we looked at, 100 odd years ago, we had the new Jewish community in our borough, and we provided burial spaces, but obviously our land needs are different now. And also what we do is a gentle polite nudge to the mayor and executive, just to set out what it can and what it can't do in its local plan. And there are, I will put it on record, real big hurdles and constraints on the ability of the local authority with around burial spaces. And it's one which must be handled sensitively. I think there is a great engagement offer from the council, and I think using the faith forum again, I think it's a great engagement from the faith communities to come together and both parties to explain where everyone is. There are some I've learned a lot. There are some real complexities about this, and I think in a really open and fair and transparent environment, I think it's useful just to set it out. So those are our three, not rocket science, but three recommendations that we help. What we hope is the committee to allow greater understanding between, those groups outside of the council and the council to get together into a space of partnership and just to have a dialogue. I will say, I recommend, I'm not sure, did we tape I'm looking at Michael, did we tape the meetings?
I believe so.
Right, yeah, because I think what we might do is it's a great. I have to think about it. Do we send it? It's there for people to see, and also what I will say, a plea for the mayor. Ellie and Jane got some really good ideas for some of the complexities of planning, and if only they had a chance to talk about their thinking. There's one, I think. Councillor Nate Higgs came up with an idea about how we comply with biodiversity. And I think Ellie or Jane can correct me. Ellie and Jane had a very good solution to that. And it was in all our X number of schemes coming forward, there is provision in those schemes around biodiversity already inculcated in what the planning officers were doing. Really what I want to say, if the planning officers could go and communicate what they're doing much more, I think people's knowledge would increase. My knowledge has certainly increased. I think fears would decrease amongst groups and people. And on that note, I'll shut up and take questions. But thanks to the mayor and officers, and also who's not here, Vicky Clark, who's departed us, and it is excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, left the organisation.
What did I say?
The dearly departed.
Oh, right, sorry.
Just left the organisation. Still with us.
Still with us, yeah.
Right. Thank you, Mayor.
May I just, on behalf of Councillor John Whitworth, Deputy Cabinet Member, whose portfolio also includes planning and development and control, alongside the officers and Vicky and Paul now who's come in, for the really helpful engagement with planning colleagues on the local plan process. We will be publishing the Regulation 19. It will be coming to Cabinet in June, and please be assured that in context of some key elements of your recommendations, of which will provide a formal response in due course in line with the protocol. On the burial space and faith-specific burial space, there's been ongoing discussion and dialogue with specific faith representatives in light of the burial space need. I will be circulating an update to all members and will ask yourself and other members of your scrutiny. I provided that first. I would love for the planning team to be out and about all the time, elevating and impressing people on the importance of all things planning as part of enhancing literacy and also demystifying planning, because it's probably one of the most interesting disciplines of work alas, they're very constrained in terms of the volume of applications that come through, and they have to do their core work, but I'm sure that they will welcome what they're taking from you as a growth pitch, which will then be passed over to Paul, and then we'll no doubt navigate it. But no, it's been really enjoyable, and thank you very much for embracing it fully.
Okay, Rita?
Not wishing to on councillor Paul's parade.
Please.
What account did you take the equality impact assessment and the process and on the material elements of the local plan? Did you look at it?
No, we had, be honest, we had 2 meetings. Obviously, we had a lot of time. And if you look in here, we had 10 topics, 8 topics with which we scoped out. And to be fair, we only had 3 meetings and we didn't get to the meat of it, to be honest.
Fair enough. Maybe a helpful suggestion would be, you're talking about fairly, there's actually not any data in your report. So I think, you know, for people reading this, to actually understand the significance of the issues that you've read, it would have been strengthened by referring, and it must exist somewhere in the booklet of it, the equality impact assessment. That's what I'd say.
No, it's a good point. Yeah, well made. Yeah. And maybe I'm not sure, looking at Michael, whether we can take that impact assessment and stick it in as that will suffice. So let me. Okay.
Here, if I may, if that's the case, and it's a really welcome question from Councillor Rita Chadder. There is high regard and a response to the equalities duties as it relates to planning policy, and we can provide a short brief note as to how the Equalities Act and duty that we're subject to is considered in the context of developing a local plan and planning policy, because it's been crucial as part of the core evidence underpinning our approach to the local plan and our policies.
My question's not about the process. I'm trusting the process at once. What I'm saying is that the demographic detail is missing in this report.
Of Newham.
Of Newham.
Yeah, we can put it.
I appreciate the comment and the specifics as it pertains to that report. Sorry for not explaining well. I'm not saying anything different. What I'm trying to provide you assurance, conversely, is when we've been dealing with the local plan, the characteristics and the population of Newham and its diversity is a fundamental feature of how we approach. Yeah.
You're making a discussion around faith, you've got to evidence it.
Yeah.
And the evidence of evidence is somewhere within the body. It doesn't tell us what, how many, etc. So that's my point.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, this is a very good piece of work, and Terry, thank you to yourself and the committee for putting this together. It's first of its kind, and the reason why it's so important, and Jane, since you've been in position, you and I have had very many conversations and representation regarding the faith group and how the local plan affect their ability to, in terms of worshiping and getting in places to worship. And I think what this has done is act as a signpost and give some advice on how the faith community and the council can work together through the faith forum, so the faith forum can have a more active voice rather than just meeting to do the sort of touchy-feely stuff. They can actually have an input into the local plan. So well done for this piece of work. And we look forward to me getting less complaints and less faith groups approaching me to help sort the problems of planning next.
I don't think that can guarantee that.
Okay.
Yes.
Are members proposing an amendment to the report?
But I propose.
Yeah, the report is in the draft form here.
Okay, could I propose amendment to the report we do the diversity data impact assessment of the report, which reflects Newham's rich cultural and religious diversity.
Is that reflective of the diversity of the people that you spoke to or surveyed, or the focus would that necessarily reflect that you've been speaking to?
Yeah, we had a representative from the black churches who came and spoke to it. And I went out to see leaders, regardless of peers. So obviously in 2 meetings, we got to the conclusion, but what Councillor Chadder rightly said, it'd be useful to add in some rich data of what is that richness of Newham in terms of all its groups to highlight the importance of the recommendations.
Just also note that having a mapping of faith groups and groups, you might not have covered all the groups.
But yeah, we debated that at the meeting. The Faith Forum, Councillor Anne Easter and Chair had this meeting with her, and I was there. And what there was a desire to make sure that database is as accurate and as rich as possible. And Councillor Easter, who's the Mayor's religious and commissioner, did say they were going to give an added emphasis to cover those, but also supporting that is obviously as councillors, I speak, we would ensure that any groups we know of can be added to that list as well. But we did cover that point on the accuracy of.
So you probably need to do that work before you buy the data.
Well, we've got to do it as a snapshot in time, because if we wait, we'll never get it done.
We do need to move on. So thank you very much. So I move that the local plan scrutiny report be adopted with the recommendations added and refer to the Mayor Cabinet for an executive response. That's
Agreed.
good. Thank you very much. And with that, I move on to item 10 on my agenda, which is appointments. There are no appointments. I then move on to item 11, which is the progress report, and that is items that we asked for items to be referred back, except us. Does any member have any comments, contributions to make on that item?
No? Is it the tracking of? I'd just like it noted for the minutes that we've, and I did have a conversation with James Bartis about this, we've had 0 responses from the communications team to the communications item that we looked at in December, which is 4 months of lack of communication. Although he has explained that because the new leads only just come into post, that's why there's a gap and we will receive responses. But from a communications team, that's pretty poor.
I know it's taken a long time. The Mayor and I, in one of our catch-up, did talk about communication. I informed that we are trying to work and get this done. And I know you and I have spoken about it, and it's frustrating that it's taken so long.
But this isn't about communications round what Scrutiny is doing. This is questions that were asked at open scrutiny in December.
Yes.
So
okay.
That's a different matter.
I think it's because it's also June when we set the work program. We asked some questions.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. That's noted. Michael, can you make a note of that? If there is no other contribution to that, I move that the progress report and scrutiny information requests, scrutiny reports and recommendation, other matters raised by the committee be noted.
Noted.
And the next one, the forward plan.
Yeah.
Is there any contribution to the items? And this is a corporate forward plan. No. Okay, thank you. And the date of the next meeting, it's the 9th of May.
Okay, we're not doing chairs updates.
Yeah.
Did that earlier.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, we still have some time aside to skipping that. Chairs update. Councillor Masters.
Thank you. As I wasn't at the last meeting, I'd quite like to do a quick update on health. I do have 5 sides of information of what we've been doing over the last year, but our main topics have been a very large substantive item on the ability of our local health system to meet our increasing population needs. We've had some very worrying findings about that. that we will be taking back to the leaders of the integrated care system. In addition to that, we're hoping to see find draft of the new air quality strategy. Myself and Councillor Paul, as representatives of Environment and Health, did look at an early draft, but it had very little health yet. So we're hoping that a later draft will be more refined. We've done a lot of work and we've got a report coming on right care, right person. The revised strategy of the police in terms of attending incidents involving people who are in mental health crisis. We're particularly concerned about the quality of data being captured by the police and the potential for people to sort of fall between stools. So we're going to be looking at that. In addition to that, our sort of standing item on emerging issues has done a lot of work on fire safety at Newham Hospital. There's a fire brigade enforcement order that's 4 years outstanding. We're deeply concerned about that. And then we've been looking at things such as the transfer of control of 6 GP surgeries in Newham. So a lot of really, really serious issues and very original issues that my committee's been looking at.
Right, Councillor Paul.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah. So the time is now 21:23, and I am bringing this meeting to a close. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great meeting, you can't hear half of it, fantastic.
I think you hear everything. You heard everything.
Well, I thought so, yeah, I didn't hear half of it. It's fantastic. I see all these people moving around me.
Michael, do you just want to switch? Michael?
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. See you later.
Okay.